even though they made millions of dollars off it, and had a big fight, stomped out of the boardroom, and said I quit. That was it.
20th Century Fox ultimately paid a heavy price for Ladd's departure. With his longtime ally gone from the studio, Lucas decided to go to Paramount with his latest movie idea, an action-adventure yarn called Raiders of the Lost Ark. George Lucas had fought and won the battle to gain his independence as a filmmaker. But the war between his rebel alliance and the Galactic Empire was far from over. As he began production on the final chapter of his Star Wars saga, he knew expectations among fans and critics would be greater than ever before. The project was a high-stakes gamble, with Lucas once again putting up every dollar himself. Nothing about the film, not even the smallest detail, could be taken for granted.
George came to me and he said, the title of episode 6 is Return of the Jedi. And I said, I think it's a weak title. And he came back 1 or 2 days later and he says, we're calling it Revenge of the Jedi.
Choosing the film's title was just the beginning. Jedi would require thousands of production decisions on both sides of the globe.
We were constructing really in 2 places in California, shooting at ILM, that's 3, and of course working and shooting in London at the same time.
As Lucas discovered, independence was a double-edged sword. Quitting the Directors Guild made it impossible for him to hire his first choice, Steven Spielberg. Instead, Lucas chose Welshman Richard Marquand, best known for the World War II thriller Eye of the Needle. As the two met with Lawrence Kasdan to discuss Jedi's script, a key issue was whether Harrison Ford, who is now equally famous for the role of Indiana Jones, would return as Han Solo.
The other actors after Star Wars had signed on to do 2 more because I wanted to finish the whole thing. Harrison did not. He had the idea, oh, why don't you kill him off? Why don't you kill him off?
I thought Han Solo should die. I thought he ought to sacrifice himself for the other 2 characters.
I also felt someone had to go. You know, I felt someone had to die.
I said, he's got no mama, he's got no papa, he's got no future. He has no story responsibilities at this point. So let's allow him to commit self-sacrifice.
And I thought it should happen very early in the last act so that you would begin to worry about everybody. We should sacrifice somebody. And George was against it. And George knew what he wanted, and he got what he wanted.
Hey, it's me. Once production began, Lucas was determined not to let the budget escalate as it had on Empire.
Good luck. You're gonna need it.
It wasn't easy, given that the rest of the world assumed money was no object.
Anytime you would go in and try and negotiate for production facilities, or people would say, oh, well, that'll cost $2 when it might normally cost $1. So I had the suggestion that we change the name of the picture. It was called Blue Harvest, and the subline behind it was Horror Beyond Imagination.
Camera.
The idea behind it was to come up with a title that would instill absolutely no interest whatsoever in what you were doing. It was like, well, what is Blue Harvest? It's like, well, who cares? It worked until Han and Luke and Leia showed up to come to work. And everybody went, oh, I guess this really isn't horror beyond imagination. I guess this is really the next Star Wars movie.
Revenge of the Jedi would again reunite the Star Wars cast and crew, who after 6 years and 2 record-breaking motion pictures had formed a lasting bond.
With the same crew for all 3 films, for the most part. So it was, you know, a family.
I'm walking along by myself, rehearsing, going something like, Lando Calrissian never returned from this awful place, and so on and so on. Lando Calrissian and poor Chewbacca never returned from this awful place. And suddenly I hear beep, 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 and I turn around, and George is now crouched behind me, waddling along, sort of on his haunches, going beep, 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 beep. It was a joyous moment.
Like its predecessor, Jedi continued to expand the cast of characters in the Star Wars saga.
What's that?
One of the biggest was intergalactic gangster
I know that laugh.
Jabba the Hutt.
George said, "Well, I need something that's, alien and grotesque. That's like Sydney Greenstreet." Oh, okay. When I had kind of gotten this idea down to this big slug-like thing that is just this big pulsating mass of flesh. At one point, I had a fez on one of the characters, like Sydney Greenstreet. And then Stuart Freeborn in England's job was to fabricate the thing, and that was operated with one puppeteer for each arm, 2 puppeteers for the arms, another guy doing the head, another guy, radio control guy, doing the eyes. There was like a couple little people in it, pulling things to make the tail move around. It was quite a thing.
I had my little dwarf sitting inside. I had a little seat made for him in the tail here, and he operated it all. And he was sitting there for quite a few days doing this, and if he operated the first one, it made, whichever way he pulled it, it would either lift it upwards or sideways, you see, so that he could make that move in any direction.
And action.
At last, Master Luke's come to rescue me.
I must be allowed to speak. You will bring Captain Solo and the Wookiee to me.
Master Luke, you're standing on...
Jabba has to pull the rug out from under Luke, and he falls into the pit, and there's this big Rancor pit monster. George was really adamant that we were going to do it as a man in a suit. It was going to be like a really cool Godzilla. Tony McVeigh, one of the sculptors, fabricated this big Rancor suit, and based on my design. And I designed this thing that I call it kind of a cross between a bear and a potato. It was just this big dumb thing. But it never looked that great, no matter what we did. So at some point, George said, no, let's do it, some other way. And so, Dennis thought, well, let's try and do it as a, high-speed, puppet. We designed the skeleton for Rancor. Tom Santamon and Dave Sasala and I, puppeteered the thing. It was a crazy, way of working, because this thing, it has to, walk into a room and turn around and roar, and it's like a 4-second shot, and you're shooting at 90 frames a second. You've got a second to shoot it.
ILM's creatures might have been puppets, but they could still elicit an emotional reaction from their human co-stars. One even triggered a panic attack.
I got claustrophobia once, and I didn't even have the whole suit on. I was lying on the floor, the camera is about that far away from me. Salacious Crumb, the wonderful Salacious Crumb, animated by Tim Rose. And he's pulling out my eye.
34A, take 2, A and B. Action.
And something went in my mind. I didn't catch a breath or something, and I suddenly could feel panic just absorbing into my body.
My eye, Doctor, help!
And I was saying, get me out, get me out, get me out, get me out, get me out. And I just kept repeating it until they managed to whiz the head off.
Daniels may have lost his head as 3PO, but when it came to risking life and limb, the production now had a team of trained stunt professionals. For the execution scene on Jabba's barge, stunt performers dropped in on the most ravenous monster yet, the Sarlacc.
It wasn't edited that way, but I was the first guy to come off the skiff into the pit. Because I had to make sure it would work and everybody's going to be all right. I had a lot of sand coming on top of me. But I was able to say to the guys, if you go in, shut your eyes, keep your mouth closed, right? Put some cotton wool up your nose, otherwise you'll be sniffing up sand. Those three people went in one after the other. So as one went in, they pulled him out, the other one went in, they pulled him out. So, I mean, what was happening down below is a comedy film of its own, quite honestly, yes. But these are the things the public don't see.
Chewie, your head? Where is it?
Well, I was hanging on that rope with Han Solo, and he was trying to save me. And one of the squids went right through my toe. And I'm screaming to Ben, stop, stop. And he's so busy acting. And I'm like, I'm in pain. And all of a sudden he realized that I got hurt.
Oh, wait, I thought you were flying! It's all right, I can see a lot better. No, a little higher! Just a little higher!
Harrison really, he's one of those actors that he's very intense.
Chewie, pull up!
And he really gets into what he's doing, So he was really into it.
For Carrie Fisher, getting into the role of Leia this time meant fitting into a skimpy slave girl costume.
I got to kill Jabba the Hutt, but I was still much more concerned about the slave girl outfit and what I was going to do about exercise.
1C, take 2. A and B cameras.
Wave your arm around. And darling, action!
And then George Lucas said, instead of attacking Jabba from the front and be getting angry with him and whacking him, I want Carrie Fisher to jump on his back. And then she'd got her high-heeled shoes on, and it happened to be that my little fellow inside, it was only foam rubber, and it went right into his head, and he screamed his head off. So we had to stop the car.
Hold it.
Before they could do the shot again, I had to build a little firm bit over the top of his head so she could get up there.
Take 3, pick up. A and B camera. Background panic, go. Okay, and action.
That was a great relief. He was an unpleasant thing with a lung in the corner of the mouth, and I never really liked that.
Let's go, and don't forget the droid. Run away.
For the veteran cast members, bringing something fresh to their characters was often difficult.
Don't move.
I love you.
I know.
Stand up.
Another challenge on the set was Richard Marquand's relative inexperience with special effects.
It's a difficult thing to do, work on the one hand with, the special effects, and on the other hand with a storyline with actors, and making those two things marry.
I hadn't realized that, ultimately it's probably easier for me to do these things than to farm them out. Because it was even more complex than the last one, I really did have to end up being there every day on the set and working very closely with Richard and shooting second unit, and there was really more work than I thought it was going to be.
Under Lucas's supervision, the production moved to the redwood forests of Northern California.
B camera.
There they photographed one of the film's most exhilarating action sequences.
Hey, wait!
The speeder bike chase.
Quick, jam their comm link, better quick!
I got the idea of using a Steadicam, and we did a test in a local park here, of walking through the woods on a path that we kind of disguised, and he shot with a camera that shot one frame of film every second. So when you project it back 24 frames a second, it's going 24 times faster. And we figured he walked about 5 miles an hour. It came up to about 100 miles an hour, and it looked great.